Viewer discretion is advised. After having noticed that they were animate, they excitedly conferred and began building several objects that they intended to use in battling each other. These included a transformer and a M1 Abrams tank. The children were instantly removed, at which point the creations began to fire and eventually destroyed each other. Hello everybody, I'm the Rubber. Today we bring you SCP Foundation's Safe Class Object SCP-387. SCP-387, known by the alias Living Legos, is ones not found in standard sets, such as circular wheels and prisms. It has no brand name, and every company interviewed by undercover agents thus far has denied ever making irregular Lego. When the tub is not full, either partially filled or almost emptied, the Lego will slowly duplicate themselves, stopping when the container is full. It will shrink until the red tub was fully filled. The interesting property of 387 is that when constructed by a human hand, the constructions will animate themselves, performing activities based on their surroundings, did not animate. This test was repeated with a human hand, at which point the car animated as usual. A dead hand from a recently dismembered agent was used, and of course, there was no response. The hand was then heated, which still provoked no response. Hence, according to the result of the experiment, parts is placed within a car, it will begin to drive it. Further experimentation has revealed that the car, and indeed any complex machine, needs no internal engine or power source.
Hello.
The Lego people have some form of sentience, as they interact with each other quite readily. However, if left over a period of time, the constructed people and buildings will evolve. They will also use 387 to construct more things to expand their society. Humans can interact with them quite peacefully. But if a human becomes hostile to them, they will immediately cease all activity and become inanimate. This behavior was proved in one of the experiments. A plane constructed from normal Lego was placed to the side of the community. Over the next 3 hours, the following changes were observed. Several Lego men procured some equipment from SCP-387, heading over towards the plane. With incredible efficiency, the Lego men constructed what was, for all intents and purposes, a working airport. The specific pieces having been supplied by 387 without visible signal. Then, a petrol tank zoomed over to the plane, apparently filled it with fuel, despite earlier observations that vehicles constructed from SCP-387 do not require fuel. The plane proceeded to literally take off, flying around the room at low speeds and altitude, seemingly to avoid crashing. More planes, of different make and design, were formed soon after. Judging by this, constructions of 387 have some form of understanding of the surrounding environment, was first found out by Agent H during a long train ride back to the city he lived in. Agent H discovered the tub containing SCP-387 behind the seat he was seated in, and began constructing a Lego man out of amusement. Several seconds later, it became animated. Agent H quickly disassembled the man and delivered the item to Site 19 for analysis, where it now remains. Following the discovery, the security tapes from the train were confiscated and destroyed before they could be reviewed. Due to the nature of this object and the almost non-existent harm it poses, it is stationed in a storage container in Site 19 with a standard lock. The red tub in which SCP-387 is contained, SCP-387 will not duplicate itself unless at least a layer of it covers the bottom of the aforementioned container. A sheet is available for those wishing to utilize 387, and access will be revoked if it is not properly restored. Also, as further testing has revealed that it does not have any dangerous and unusual anomalies or features, this SCP has been in high demand for extended use. In the personnel testing, SCP-387 has improved morale and attitude by 87%. As a result, Dr. Arch suggested that all personnel should be allowed to use it freely for recreational activities, and the request was later approved by the Foundation. However, SCP-387 should not be given to children under the age of 10, especially if the aforementioned children are influenced by cartoons and television shows. Several young children were given SCP-387 and instructions to use their imagination. The children, who had their memories of this experiment removed, began constructing various objects and began building several objects that they intended to use in battling each other, at which point the creations began to fire and eventually destroyed each other, though not after considerable effort. How the hell did these children gain knowledge of the workings of a M1 Abrams tank? I'm not responsible for cleaning out the mess those things make. If anyone is stupid enough to let children go at 387, I am not recommending an upgrade to Euclid, as the constructions did not fire whilst in the presence of humans. This has been tested with adults and proved just as correct, said Dr. Arch. In another experiment, Foundation's personnel emptied the red tub containing SCP-387. Then, commercially available Lego was then placed in the tub for a minute, also did not duplicate itself. Later, more of SCP-387 is added until the bottom layer was covered, at which point it began to replicate itself quite rapidly until it had been filled. The 387 removed from the tub continued to work, and 387 will not duplicate itself unless it's made. Further experimentation is being tested near SCP-387 and left the break room with Senior Research Emily. When this happened, SCP-387's world began to go berserk. The village constructed of 387, hereafter known as Blocksville, felt something horrible coming and saw a police motorcycle crashed into a pole. As he approached the crash site, he saw the motorcycle carry the remnants of Jack, horrifically mutated by the powers of chaos, attempting to lash out at him. With ease, Dionys, as soon as he looked up, he saw a flight of mutants making their way through the streets. Hefting his croak, banging his fist against his chest. "Face me, and I may grant you your absolution in death." The mutants screeched and rushed him at once, while Dionys rushed forward, his Crozius alight in a killing blaze. He lifted his Crozius overhead and brought it down. Beside him, Captain Adaris swung his hammer around, launching a nearby car at unholy speed and destroying a swatch of income. While all this was happening, Carly and Emily returned to find the break room in sheer horror. Carly let out a big sigh, donned her goggles, and grasped the knob handle, her clipboard ready to shield her from stray projectiles. It's cleanup time, taking the mutants up and utterly destroying them. As quick as the hands took the enemy, it brought back those who were overcome, those who were unfortunate enough to have been forcibly warped, and gently stroked Dionys on the head. Dionys prays to the Emperor, for he forgives and protects. Adaris prays to their savior. Dionys, however, was still mentally recovering from having been personally blessed by the God Emperor herself. The chaplain Carly touched had commissioned a giant golden brick statue of her, and the minifigs were giving it worship. Viewer discretion is advised.
There was a break in the case when David received a tip that the missing boy had been meandering around that same park again. He was dispatched immediately and had alerted the boy's family as well. Upon arrival, the parents were already there and were calling out to their son. Instead of a heartfelt family reunion, the boy screamed at them to leave him alone. Confused, his parents asked what was wrong and who was hurting him. Jacob screamed. His parents took some steps back and looked to David for help. Seeing no other option, David pulled out his pistol and trained it on the boy. "Hold it. We don't want to hurt you." Jacob yelled, "Attack!" and the cloud turned into a long, solid spear and shot towards David. He dodged and fired a couple of bullets into the cloud, causing it to distort and fade slightly. Seizing the opportunity, David charged forward. Backup arrived shortly after, but it wasn't the usual crew of paramedics and officers that David recognized. It was the Foundation. Keep their mouths shut about what happened that night. Hello everybody, I'm the Rubber. Today, we bring you SCP Foundation Keter Class Object SCP-204. SCP-204, also known as the Protector, consists of two entities. 204-1 is described as a techno-organic colony of nanomachines controlled by 204-2, of whom is typically a young child. 204-1 mostly spends its time as a nearly invisible cloud that stays near 204-2. When 204-2 is under threat or commands it, 204-1 will materialize. It will then take on the shape of whatever 204-2 imagines and promptly eliminate the threat. Regardless of what shape or form it takes, 204-1 remains incredibly strong, durable, and most importantly, obedient to 204-2 and other conventional weaponry. As mentioned, instances of 204-2 are young children. 204-1 will stay with 204-2 until either the child dies or turns 14. It has been theorized that 204-1 this may be linked to why instances of 204-2 exhibit aggressive behavior and put themselves in grave danger non-stop, so that it can find prey to consume more easily. SCP-204 was first discovered when a child named Jacob had gone missing in a town, as they desperately wanted to bring in whoever abducted him. Being a police officer, David Coy was deeply invested in this case. But there were a few things that just didn't sit quite right with him about it. For starters, witnesses who saw the child before he vanished said that there was no one around him at the time. After wandering into a local park, the kid was not seen or heard of since. As explained in a crudely written letter in crayon, he was going to do what he wanted with his friends, completely torn apart and covered in partially devoured human remains. Similar incidents occurred until the Foundation began to put two and two together. Feeling that these events could be related, the Foundation decided to keep track of the missing child case's progress. It was proven fruitful, as the Foundation was able to follow David's investigation. When the agents arrived, David had already subdued the child on the ground. Tell me, boy, how do you feel when you killed all those people? Innocent lives that brought you no harm. The following is the documented discussion Site Director Julia Snow had with O5-2 concerning a containment protocol for 204-2. Sir, am I reading this correctly? Yes, it is as you see. 204-1 needs a permanent stock of candidates in case 204-2 perishes or becomes of age. But this is wrong. How could you go so low, sir? But with you. All candidates for this protocol will be in the age of below 10. What is the issue here? You know damn well what the problem here is. What if we can't find those perfect candidates? Julia said as she threw the files at O5-2's face angrily. There will always be candidates, Miss Snow. If we can't find them on the streets, then we'll find them on some of the less desirable channels. Human traffickers, for example. Human traffickers? Are you hearing yourself? Since when did the Foundation associate themselves with such heinous groups? We'll be giving these unfortunate young souls a life and purpose, you see. They'll be given the chance to work for the agency that's responsible for the containment of anomalies. Very, very bad people. We just have to be the lesser evil. What about those without histories of abuse? Here, you plan to place these children with no histories of abuse into the care of D-class personnel? Personnel who have long histories of crime, and am I really? Do I need to remind you about the last time 204-1 rampaged when we had no candidates? It slaughtered anything it could find within 10 miles until it latched onto a poor little Jacob. Regardless, you're toying with innocent lives here. Gosh, why can't we just terminate 204-1 and forget about all these talks about perfect candidates or whatever? You're not seeing the bigger picture, Miss Snow. If we can make this anomaly work for us, imagine the things we can achieve. You've seen how powerful these kids can be when utilizing these nano machines. Are you talking about weaponizing these children? We've seen these nano machines in action, and they've brought nothing but destruction. You truly are insane. Now, will you continue to refuse to enact this containment protocol? Julia only slumped weakly into her chair and shook her head no. Following this conversation, Containment Protocol O5-2, Babysitter, was greenlit to be used should there ever be a shortage of candidates for 204-1. As for Site Director Julia Snow, she tendered her resignation as she didn't want to know if that dreaded protocol would ever come to pass. Dr. Bright could tell that his son, TJ, A boy perpetually living his younger years was trying his best to mask the pain and stress of the healing process. All right, that's enough for today. Dr. Bright patted TJ's head. He could feel the distressed sweat seeping through his hair. TJ smiled, which seemed to please Dr. Bright. The doctor's assistant, Sina, saw more in the gesture. We patch him up every time. What kind of silly question is that? I don't mean his external wounds. I'm talking about those that our eyes cannot see. Hello everybody, I'm the Rubber. Today, we're bringing you a tale from the SCP Foundation. TJ sat in front of his window, looking out into the garden, lost in thought. Sina entered the room behind him, holding TJ's favorite chocolate bar. Good job today, TJ. Here, you must be hungry. I'll just leave this here. Beautiful day, isn't it? Want to go out? TJ shook his head and smiled. He continued to look at the garden, but Sina could tell that his eyes were seeing something more. It was as if he was staring into a world that she couldn't see. In stark contrast to the calm breeze blowing through the garden, a maelstrom was stirring inside TJ's mind. He'd love to go out, but what difference would it make? Wherever he went, he could still hear the screams as painful images flashed through his mind. Suddenly, his room turned crimson red, with blood and bullet holes splattered across the walls. Somewhere, sirens blared loudly, and a rifle in his torn gloves, with nothing but adrenaline running through his body. SCP-682's powerful jaw appeared before either could react, and the screaming stopped. TJ was stunned, shocked, and terrified by 682's viciousness. Before he could collect himself, 682 rushed toward him. In less than a second, TJ's right arm was gone. He began to scream, TJ, TJ, TJ! When Sina's worried voice reached TJ, he found himself back in his room again. No blood, no sirens, no death. He checked his arms, covered in bandages but still attached to it. It's okay, I'm here. They're not real. You're safe here. It had gotten worse. The painful experience of those he healed stayed with him, and lately they had become so vivid that the visions were bleeding into his reality. Always ready to remind him of what he's seen, through her endless tears. He smiled to the world around him, even when it offered him nothing but pain and darkness. Sina flipped through TJ's sketches scattered across the floor and shuddered. It's unthinkable abominations, some of which Sina recognized from containment. Images of MTF men in agony as they are dismembered? He's just a kid, she thought, looking at TJ. He gave her a weak smile. I can arrange a transfer for SCP-999 to be with you if you'd like to. And Sina slowly got up and left the room. He just needed a ray of hope, a little light to brighten up his world, and that light now rested on the table, the chocolate bar. He always felt better after eating them. They were his favorite. The smooth, rich taste made the screams and darkness go away for a brief moment. But what good did it do when the horror always came back to him? He removed strange, he thought. It bleeds and bleeds and bleeds, but it'll eventually stop. Yet, why won't the wounds inside me heal? How can something that doesn't bleed hurt me and torment me so much? TJ noticed that Kairos the bear was beside him now. He snuggled it against his chest, and it reciprocated his affection. He could feel its little stubby hands hugging him. It made him feel safe. The way Kairos looked at him made him feel like he was being listened to, without even having to say a single word. And he felt a smile growing across his face. TJ smiled because it was the only way he knew how to make living less painful. As Dr. Bright, it made her happy and relieved when she saw TJ unwrapping the chocolate bar. Have you thought of getting someone to take care of him? I'm his father. I'll handle it. You're not even there for him. I'm monitoring him, aren't I? But you're not doing anything. Sina tossed the sketches onto the table next to the doctor. What is this? Dr. Bright picked up a drawing, immediately wincing in disgust. This is what goes on in your son's head. Do you even know what he's dealing with? That's right, you don't. He doesn't just feel all the injuries these men suffered. Oh, no. That's nothing compared to what goes on in his mind. Now don't you dare… The pain, the deaths, the trauma. How many times have these men killed or watched others be killed? Right now, his mind is full of those memories, forcing him to relive them over and over again. When he healed them, not only did he take on their broken bones, but also their mental trauma. Of course I know! He's my son, for God's sake! Do you think it doesn't pain me to see him suffering like this? What do you suggest that we do, huh? Drug him with amnestics every time he heals? The side effects will make it worse than it already is. If you could at least tell him about it, maybe… Oh, come on. How naive can you be? He may look like a teenager, but he has the mind of a 3-year-old. You can try to break it down for him, but he will never understand a damn thing. He will not grow. He will not be able to process the thoughts in his head. There's nothing we can do. So that's it then. We just let him suffer alone forever? As Sina and Dr. Bright spoke, TJ was visible on the screen, speaking to Kairos. The bear was looking at TJ, nodding and occasionally leaning forward to hug him. I volunteer to be his caretaker. Your son like that? Don't forget your place here, Sina. You'll gladly bear those consequences if it means a clear conscience. She stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. Dr. Bright looked back to the monitor. Dr. Bright noticed the peaceful expression on his face. It was an expression that he knew would not last. TJ took up a pen and a pad of paper and began doodling. That's your 4th one this morning now. It's not good if you keep this up, you know. Bess, I heard your conversation with Dr. Bright. Despite keeping so many anomalies contained, these walls are surprisingly thin. You'd think they would make it harder for anomalies to get… You're good with kids. I've seen you around. Could you perhaps work your magic on TJ? Why not? You're an anomaly. No offense. Can't you be around him and take care of him? None taken. And as a matter of fact, I could care for him. I can make him laugh, make him forget all the pain. But that only lasts a moment. When the darkness comes again, the most we can do is try to shine a little light that can guide him out of the darkness. I don't get it. SCP-999 would be perfect for him. Seeing how he had to endure all these painful things, I don't understand why TJ dislikes the idea so much. TJ's a child, but he understands 999's value for the Foundation and how not to be selfish. He's a selfless soul. That's why he agreed to perform all those healing tasks in the first place. Wouldn't you agree? He only agreed so his father wouldn't get angry. You heard how the doctor talked about TJ. It's a choice TJ made. Selflessness is his strategy, and kindness is his weapon against the darkness. As Sina… Oh, look at me, rambling incessantly again. I best be going now. Wouldn't want to keep your visitor waiting. Visitor? As Bess turned to leave, he walked past TJ, who was waiting nearby with a piece of paper in his hand. Bess patted his head and smiled. Go on now, child, he seemed to say. Is there something on my face? Smoke make you cough and get you sick. She noticed that TJ's worried gaze was fixed on her cigarette. She crushed the cigarette against the wall and stuffed it into her coat, which made TJ smile brightly. He held the paper out to her. What is this? A drawing? TJ nodded. It was a crude drawing of a boy standing behind a winged angel, holding out a shield, emanating immense light that held off monsters in the darkness. TJ tugged gently at Sina's sleeve. Can I have chocolate again tomorrow? She looked at the drawing again and realized that she was the angel and that the shield was made out of a chocolate bar, protecting TJ from the monsters, a light guiding him out of darkness.